So this last Sunday, we just wrapped up our series "Hope Lies Ahead" here at Port City, and I don't know about you, but I thought it was awesome to be able to teach together, and especially over Father's Day. I think it's so cool. So, but was there anything that we weren't able to get to in the series that you wish we did?
One of the things that I think is so important as you're thinking about hope is the presence of God in prayer. And that's not just in answer to prayer, but I talked about the relational aspect of that, but the peace that really comes, and it's you want to go there, but it's difficult to go there in some ways because it's one of those things that you have to find out for yourself.
Yeah.
Another thing I would have wanted to do, I think more of, is just encourage people who are in that difficult place where, you could spend so much time on this, wherever they may be, especially that person who says, well, I've prayed and, nothing has happened. And, how do I live through that?
Yeah. I'll never forget whenever we were in, Massachusetts, or and a little girl came up to me after we spoke, and we did a similar, series there, and asked me, and I think this happens to us a lot, where she asked me, "Why are you okay and my dad's not?" And her dad was an addict, and
he had died.
Overdosed. Yeah, he died. Yeah, and I have that written down in my journal because that just hit me to the core, and it made me realize a lot of things about our story, because our story is unique. Doesn't work like that for everyone. There's a lot of people who don't make it out, or don't have the happy, pretty. So where we're at right now, I didn't want to say ending because our story's not over, but that don't have that our story happen in their lives. They don't have this resolve, and I think sometimes it can be hard for people to hear our story and be there.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's where I think, again, though, I come back to that same place of prayer, because you are helpless, and there's literally so little that you can do. But I think breakthroughs come as we let God in. And sometimes, again, as I mentioned during the series that we did, I got a letter from a lady, really faithful, beautiful Christian family, fasted, prayed for their son, and he ended up dying of an overdose. And it's so tough. But even then, I come back to that place of prayer, because that's where the comfort flows in, especially as we're real with God about why.
And I think it's easy to want to explain, whether it's a situation like this or any bad thing that happens in life, it's easy to want an explanation and to try to figure it out, why did this happen? And it's just an impossible game to play at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah.
Because, and I guess the end of the story is we live in a broken world, and things happen that we never want to happen, that no one ever wants to see happen. But God is so active in redeeming those things and pulling them out, and giving them purpose. And I, for a while, made the mistake of thinking that meant that because he redeems them so well, I thought he almost caused these things. But now I see that, because we live in a broken world, things happen, and God is such a redeemer,
right,
that he can bring beauty out of it.
Yeah.
Even if it's not something that anyone ever wanted to happen.
Right. He wastes nothing. And that's one of the things that we have felt as a family. I know your mom and I both felt that, there were roads that we never would have chosen, that we never, wanted to go down. But at the same time, we look at what we've gotten to see, because we did.
Yeah.
And there's a way in which you can look at that and say, I'm so grateful, because it's like dawn and darkness. If you didn't know what the darkness looked like, you wouldn't know the beauty of the dawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And it is living I think the reality of living in a broken world is hoping on that, is relying on that now in the present, and also for the future, that there is a day whenever everything is redeemed, and being able to hold on to that. And I think we have to do that in moments because, I talked a little bit about there being so many different voices that we hear from the world that say things about who we are, who we should be, or who we're becoming. And these are they're positive voices, they're negative voices. There's things we like, things that we don't like. And I think we all have to learn to recognize lies when they're lies and truth whenever it's truth, and allow God to be the person who defines that reality for us.
Right. I mean, I think that whole question of what do you identify as, what do you identify in, comes down to what do we think about the most, really, ultimately.
Yeah, and it can feel, that question and that idea can feel really heady and philosophical, but it's actually incredibly practical, because that informs everything that you do. And ultimately, that's how I think we can all kind of get to the root of our identity, is what is fueling my actions? What is fueling how I live? What do I value most? And for me, whenever I began to walk with Jesus, I had so many parts of my life and actions and lifestyles that had to change, that I had to give up. From really, really small stuff that I didn't even understand why I was giving it up. I just knew God told me to bigger stuff, hard things.
And that, brings up the whole question, especially for families who, are dealing with people who are maybe, stuck in addiction or in that difficult place. How do you keep loving them? What does that look like? And I know that's one a lot of people wrestle with, and I think so much of that comes down to getting our love from God. And we've talked about this before, how people often say love must be tough, and they usually are thinking about the boundaries that they're going to put on someone else.
Yeah, like even like the speaking the truth in love, when I'm really kind of bashing you over the head with the truth.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we have to look at it. We've got to turn that and say, well, love's got to be tough on us as well. Am I genuinely loving like Jesus, or am I just setting boundaries because, I don't want to be perhaps,
bothered.
Yeah. It's such a tough thing because, this is where, again, we really have to get our love from God, because He empowers us to love, and because His love is infinite, we can do that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think to love without condition and to love without expectations is really hard, but it also changes things both for yourself and the person that you're loving. Because I think that's a lot of people's fears, that if I'm too loving, that I might never see this person change, or that they're not going to know that they're doing anything wrong, or and I think that fear, I can see how it is valid, but I think lots of times we discount the power of love. And how God works through that is, Jesus' ultimate power and might on the cross. His grand expression of power was love, and that's so countercultural to how we think as human beings.
Right.
But love changes everything.
Loving someone and putting boundaries. I mean, sometimes there's a reason for those boundaries. Maybe you're trying to protect children or whatever. But are we open? Again, are we open to what only God can do, or are we just letting kind of the world's ways of thinking define us in that?
Yeah, it's the renewing of your mind, both in your inner thought and how you live, and how you view the people around you, and your family and the people that you love. So you wrote. One of the books that you wrote while I was in my addiction, Prayer for Prodigals, is a lot of prayers about, like, whenever you were going through this incredibly difficult time with me and my sister. So what are the prayers that you pray now, has that changed?
It's funny because if you were to say, well, is there one prayer out of that book that I prayed, I think of a verse, where and just that are just the words of Jesus, where he says, "Bring the boy to me," and that really empowered a lot of my praying. And I think my prayer could be boiled down to save him and set him free, and that saving had to do with everything. So.
Yeah, and I love that principle, because I think that's something that we can put into everything. Like, let's bring it to the feet of Jesus and allow him to do what he does, instead of trying to force things ourselves, which I think we so often do just in our lives. And I wish we had time to kind of go into that idea more, because living as a follower of Jesus in a broken world is incredibly costly and hard.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's really easy to miss.
Yeah, that's one of the things I appreciate about your faith, is that you see that, and you've challenged me to go back to the words of Jesus, and to say, okay, am I really applying this in my own heart and life? And that's a beautiful thing to see, because being a follower of Jesus means that. And sometimes you're right. We make it kind of an easier thing that really doesn't have a lot of definition.
Yeah. And it is simple, but it is difficult.
Right.
And I think that's the thing, to go back to what Jesus taught and look at his words in his parables and the Sermon on the Mount and all these different spaces, and say, how's this expressed in my daily life today? It's such a simple idea, but it is so hard to do.
Yeah, it really is.
I'm grateful that we've been able to hit all this stuff today.
Yeah, me too.